What motivates hotel guests to use room service? Hello and welcome to my presentation. My name is Dean Ging, and today I will talk to you about the results that I gathered for my CW2. So let's get started. First of all, I will talk about the hypothesis that I proposed in CV1 and I will elaborate on it. Then I will talk about guest types, the market Vienna. I will show you the recordings of the order time, tell you the most important things about guest feedback that I receive, and some other reasons why people order from room service. And at the end, there will be a conclusion. Hotel guests that are staying in Vienna are generally willing to spend more money on the consumption of food when using room service than they would either for the purchase of a substitute product in a supermarket and/or in a restaurant, because of reasons such as supply and demand, convenience, and the feeling of being on vacation or on a business trip. So what I mean by that is, even though it is quite well known that room service is more expensive, people are still willing to buy from room service just because they are in special circumstances, like being on vacation or on a business trip, because then they have the excuse to act differently than they normally would. Or it is simply just the convenience. Sometimes people just like to treat themselves and have the food delivered to their room because it's easier. Another thing is supply and demand, because in Vienna there are not restaurants that are open at 4 o'clock at night, and room service is a really good alternative for people that are hungry at that time. So in later slides we will discuss more about the different points, and now I will move on with the next part. So I realized that there's not just only one type of guest or one type of consumer, but there's several. And I just splitted them up in two main groups because those two groups act very differently, but within the group they are quite similar. So there's the leisure guests. Leisure guests include individual guests, honeymooners, families, school classes, friends. Like the name says, just people that are there on leisure, just to enjoy the city, the hotel, or anything like that. And then there's the business guests. Those business guests are usually participants of exhibitions, congresses, or just corporate meetings. And they are there to work, and they are there sent by either the company or their startups or just anything similar that is work related. So when I realized that, I used the Opera system, which is a hotel software, and I just analyzed what kind of groups we have. And since the Intercontinental Wien is mostly a business hotel, you can see that around 70% of the guests are there on business and only 30% on leisure. Well, this might depend on the season of the year, but this is an average that we have in our hotel. And this is important to know for later on. So keep that in mind. One thing that leisure and business guests of the Intercontinental Wien have in common is of course the location. As you can see on the picture, there are possibilities to eat out. There are restaurants surrounding the hotel. But after midnight, almost all restaurants are closed. So this leads to a supply and demand problem, because there are guests that want to consume after midnight, but the only supplier is the hotel. So guests need to order from room service, and this can be seen in the following slide. This pie chart shows you when people order from room service. Interestingly, more than one-fourth of all orders happen during the time when there are no alternatives, which means between midnight and 6 o'clock in the morning. Further, it is remarkable that more than one-fifth of all orders take place during breakfast time. This is quite significant because most guests' breakfast is included in the room rate. This statistic shows that consumers are willing to spend more just to be comfortable in their room. The illustrated chart shows the detailed numbers of covers sold, average checks, and revenue during August 2014. Again, it is interesting to observe that consumers rather spend an average of 13 euros for a relaxed breakfast in their room than a free one in the restaurant. The peak during dinner time can be explained with the return of most guests from a hard day of business negotiations or a long day of sightseeing. According to my colleagues from the room service department, the low number of lunch orders can be explained with the fact that most guests like to eat out during that time. Another important part of my research was the guest feedback. When I asked the leisure guests why they would use room service, they told me that it would be a nice vacation treat for themselves. Others told me that there's no possibility to eat when they arrive late at night in the hotel. I also heard that some of them wanted to stay in just to have a nice breakfast, lunch, or dinner in the room, and a majority of the leisure guests didn't even know why they would order from room service. They just did it. Business guests had different reasons. Some of the reasons that I heard were the expenses are being paid by the company anyway, so they didn't really bother about the money. Others told me that it would save time and they can be more efficient because they can work while they're waiting. A lot of them told me that after traveling, they were exhausted and it would be more convenient to eat in their room. During my research, I also encountered an article called Consumed by Samsung. This article was published in 2013, and there Samsung explains why people would sometimes buy overpriced products. One reason is marketing. People tend to fall for advertisements and would sometimes buy things that they don't need or that are very overpriced. Another reason might be the natural behavior that sometimes people just copy other behavior of people that they already know. So what this means is, let's say a person sees their friends or their parents order room service. They would just register this behavior and do it themselves in the future. Then people sometimes just act impulsive, so sometimes they just buy without even thinking about it. Another reason might be the temptation. Sometimes the temptation is very, very big when they just see that food is available, and even though it's very expensive, they just buy it without even thinking about it too much. Another reason is the state of mind. Sometimes when people are happy, they celebrate with food and they don't really care about the money. The other thing, vice versa, if people are depressed, they sometimes try to fill this void with food. And in that case, they would also not really care about the money. They just want the food. In conclusion, I would like to say that all the points that I've mentioned so far are certainly important when it comes to the decision-making process of the consumer, whenever they decide to order from room service or not. But at the same time, I also think that room service in itself is a very unique construct. Just when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, you see that room service fulfills physiological needs, but at the same time also esteem needs. It adds some sort of prestige and a feeling of accomplishment whenever you order from room service because of the price tag and because of the special location. And therefore, I think room service is a topic that is very interesting because it has so many psychological aspects to it. So now there's just only one thing that's left to say, and that's thank you very much for your attention. Have a nice day.